Morning all, it's about 6 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Maybe it's the tension of playing later. In round 4, some interesting games where players with black seem to be winning that day miraculously. The most miraculous was the Nakamura game beating Anand with black, but another game of the round was this one, where Michael Adams was white. He kicked off with E4 against Nigel Short. Nigel Short played French defence. After D4, D5, lo and behold, Michael Adams plays Knight D2. Now, for those of you who don't know, Adams' success rate with Knight D2 is absolutely phenomenal. He could write a book on this, and I think it will be a bestseller. His handling of, especially like the IQP, isolate queen pawn positions, is probably stronger than most other grandmasters. He seems to be completely adept at handling all the delicate moves required. Aronian commented as such anyway as well. I had taken the bye that day in round 4, and Aronian was in the commentary room. And it was with Daniel King as well, and I am Lawrence Trent. So Daniel King's GM, and I am Lawrence Trent. And it was fascinating to hear all the insights. And basically, Aronian, praised Adams, for his often very, calm, logical play and delicate manoeuvring. So here, Knight D2. What did Nigel Short have up his sleeve? Well, actually, in this position, the bog standard Knight F6 used to be, the only move kind of mainly considered. But John Watson in Dangerous Weapons in the French book considered that there are various waiting moves here actually in the position. A6, H6, Bishop E7 is the one that I like currently, which I played actually yesterday. I won with Bishop E7. So the idea of Bishop E7 is to wait for white to commit the knight so the F pawn's blocked in. And some people don't think that's a big deal and play Knight F3 anyway. And statistically, I kind of like that. That's cool. So there's these waiting moves to choose from. Myself, I've never tried H6, but that was what was tried. H6 is the waiting move. So did Adams commit the knight, which would block the pawn? No, actually he moved the bishop. Bishop D3, and now Nigel struck at the centre with C5, allowing potentially this dreaded isolated queen pawn situation if black's going to capture with the pawn. But is black compelled to capture with a pawn here, and then after D-C5 left with an isolated queen pawn? Maybe not. After D takes C5, which seems to encourage black to develop freely from a recapture, bishop takes c5. Lev thought the idea might be potentially queen g4. Levon Aronian thought queen g4 might be a good move, because it seems a bit strange to play d takes c5. Actually, let's just engine check this, put our metal monster friend on here. Is queen g4 actually a move? There was a fascinating variation shown that actually maybe Knight f6, because there's a cheapo idea here. Well, here this is not playable, queen g7, because there's a little cheapo idea here, very amusing. Basically, blimey, even stronger what they mentioned. They weren't using engines, by the way, but this is even stronger than they mentioned apparently. But Rook G8 is actually the second strongest move, with still the same sort of cheapo idea. And I'll show you. So say queen takes h6. Well, there's two moves, but the cheapo is like bishop takes f2 and knight g4 check. So obviously after bishop f2, this isn't that pleasant. King f1, black's doing fine. But even stronger than all this, actually, after queen g7, is to play bishop takes f2 immediately. Apparently, now this is engine move, and now after rook g8 is basically forcing. The king's actually forced here to be on f2. So white would have to give up the queen. So this queen g4 idea is basically an attempt to sort of refute black's play and maybe exploit this time wasting move h6, which has been the outrage of the chess world recently from round 4 already, from the Nakamura game, where h6, oh, wasted time, oh, engines don't like it, -3, -4, -5. A lot of people need to turn off their engines. It seems there's a lot of people that don't actually play chess and have never heard the expression, you can have like a one position, but sometimes it's difficult to win it. With engines, it seems everything is dead simple. Once you reach a theoretically one position, it's a one game. That's not the case. But anyway, Adams is not keen to try and directly refute this system with queen g4. He plays actually just knight gf3, perhaps wisely. Okay, after knight c6, it seems black's already getting a comfortable game. This h6 might have some useful properties of stopping things like knight g5 and bishop g5 in the future. White castles, and now knight ge7. So not putting it on f6 where it might, run into e5 at some point. But knight ge7, very interesting play from black, from Nigel. Maybe knight g6, and this e5 is going to be useful later. Queen e2, and now black castled. Now remember also, Michael Adams suffered a defeat in the round before against the fellow British player Luke McShane, and I guess he's nothing like me in terms of handling defeats, but he doesn't. Except he doesn't lose as much as me or me, sort of, under 2,700 players. It's very rare for Mickey to actually lose. I don't know. Sometimes, for me personally, when I lose, sometimes I start questioning my general strategies and philosophy on the game, and sometimes that can lead to a shaky game, in later rounds when I try and experiment and try and alter something. I think experimentation, maybe. For another tournament, once you've annotated or analysed all the games thoroughly, to draw some concrete conclusions with greater accuracy rather than during the tournament. It seems Mickey was a bit off in this game. Some of his moves slightly off. Also, combined with that, he's playing against a slightly unusual system here with h6. Does this really need to be punished? Is the onus again on white to punish black's seemingly outrageous and provocative play, which seems to be the theme of this round, from the Anna Naka game? So knight b3 seems logical enough, but black's pieces seem, apart from this bishop, they're okay at the moment, but this bishop's like one of the main issues. And now we have c3, okay, which is seemingly preparing to reinforce the d4 square. So both knights, one of them is ready to occupy maybe d4 at the right moment, maybe when this pawn's isolated or something. But actually, Nigel's refusing to go into an isolated queen's pawn position against Mickey, which obviously he clearly must know that Mickey's record is excellent in this Tarrasch line. He plays d takes e4, and he was thoroughly expecting queen takes e4. Okay, which I actually bumped into Nigel Short yesterday and congratulated him about the game. And he said even him in bad form could spot that there's a mate threat actually on h7, but was surprised very shortly with Adams's next move. So he was able to spot the mate threat and play knight g6. But this next move, now in the commentary room, Levon was first saying that the players themselves are in a great position to understand all the finesses. They're working really hard on the positions, and we're sort of looking at it superficially, and was trying to sort of work out, what could be the point of queen takes e4. Because actually, and Nigel Short was also expecting bishop takes e4, by the way. So both Levon and Nigel were expecting bishop e4. Now, there's something very deep and intuitive that somehow queen e4 to them is an absolutely terrible move, whilst bishop e4 is the move. I wonder what the basis of this is. Why is this the more natural choice? What do you guys think? Why would bishop takes e4 be the much more natural choice? This is what Levon Aronian was expecting. Bishop takes e4. Both might potentially run into f5, but does black ever want to play f5? It'd be weakening horribly e5. So bishop takes e4 versus queen takes e4. This is a good positional test. Maybe the queen's okay on e2. The bishop has got an ideal retreat square maybe on c2 if it needs it. The bishop does seem nice and central at the moment. Maybe it's good provocation for f5. I don't know. It seems queen takes e4, and there was this big mystery, and I had suggested that maybe the idea was bishop c4, and that was the only thing I commented on actually at this point in the game. And Aronian was saying no, not bishop c4. It's not a good move. Funny enough, that was the move that was actually soon to be played now after knight g6. Bishop c4 was indeed played. Someone else was also suggesting, maybe h4 is the idea because you got this battery. And Levon, like the trained assassin he is, said f5 and you will soon regret this, in a sort of an assassin's kind of voice, this h4 move. So I just thought, okay, the idea must be bishop c4, but yeah, it does look weird to put the bishop on c4 here. It did seem to have a natural parking spot on c2, just to retreat the bishop to c2. Maybe it's got a future, later on b3. Maybe it's more flexible on c2. On e5, it seems to be a tactical target, and this is what I asked Nigel: what is so bad about bishop c4? And the first thing I mentioned, is it like a tactical target? If black ever gets in knight e5, is attacking that bishop. So is it actually really, really badly placed on c4? Well, judging by the game continuation, it wasn't ideal on c4. King h8 was played first, which kind of puts the bishop prophylaxis away from the diagonal, but it's better than king h7 because that rules out any knight g5s in some lines with queen h5. So that's a slightly safer move than king h7, because knight g5 might be a tactic at some point later. So king h8 looks like prophylaxis against bishop c4. Anyway, I was pleased to win the guess a move competition against Levon. Well, I was just trying to work out why would queen takes e4 have been played instead of bishop takes, and I thought the only reason must have been bishop c4. But anyway, so we reached this position, queen c2. And now the bishop is the subject of tempo gain after queen c2. So the other question is, what was queen c2 about? Was it preparing against f5 in advance? We potentially got a central pawn mobility issue here. If these two pawns can go forward, chase away this defensive knight, black can use e5, he gets a dream position. Daniel King was also sort of mentioning about that's exactly what black wants, this kind of pushing forward, dislodging white's pieces, getting dream positions for the knights. e5 looks brilliant for black potentially, but actually it's used straight away now, given that the tempo gain f5 is gone because of that queen retreat. So knight c5, but it's still a tempo gain because it's on that bishop. Okay, so knight takes e5, so the defensive knight is removed anyway. So what the white king is now vulnerable without the defensive knight. It's not only h2 which is more vulnerable, it's h4. And you might think, well, what's the big deal with h4? The big deal is the queen can now install itself on h4. Very annoyingly, I thought, queen h4. So it seems black must be at least equal. Hey, let's turn on an engine evaluation just to see the engine point of view. I would suspect it's about equal. No, slightly better for white apparently. Okay, 0.20, 0.15. I thought black is doing fine here. The main problem piece is that soon to be sorted out, something like this, or maybe e5 later. It's soon to be sorted out, surely. So the move g3 was played, attacking the queen. The queen installs itself on h3. And now a strange looking move, but it must be one of the better moves to get rid of black's dynamism. But remember, black hasn't got a structural weakness here as such. He hasn't got an isolated queen's pawn. But bishop e3 at least gets rid of this venomous bishop, leaving black with the less good bishop if black wanted to exchange on e3, which actually he did do. So bishop takes e3, f takes e3, and leaving white with seemingly fragmented pawn structure. But this does add in support for a knight to d4 later, or the pawn can go to e4 later. So it doesn't. Maybe it's often not as bad as it looks, but it looks as though we've got one island, two islands, three islands. If you believe in the pawn islands concept, white's got more pawn islands, but he's got a bit of dynamism on the f file and some other stuff in return. So knight g4, threatening unsubtly mate now. Okay, so actually the bishop decides to take, because also knight takes e3 is threatened, so there's not too many choices here for white. So bishop takes g4, queen takes g4 to parry that, and now rook ad1, which stops bishop d7, which might have been handy to get onto the diagonal. f6, so the bishop is still going to be developed by changing the pawn structure with a pawn to e5 soon. So knight d4, e5. The knight goes to f5, which seems to be a tactical target, but it's got possibilities. It's not taken here. Black preserves the light square bishop, bishop e6, and the knight is reinforced now with e4. So it seems as though white's position looks okay here. Engine evaluation from a theoretical point of view. From a theoretical point of view, who's doing better? Seems black's doing slightly better, or about equal here at move 23 according to engine. So rook fd8. Now the knight reroutes to d5 with tempo, hitting the queen, and it's got the option now of knight d5, but not here because that would be losing a piece. There's a pin, bishop d5, rook d5, rook d5. There's a pin on the pawn. So king g2, b5, which seems to discourage c4 and knight d5. b3, as though c4 and knight d5 is the main plan now for white, to be able to play knight d5 without actually losing the knight. a5, we seem to have a sort of mini minority attack. The minority of pawns attacking the majority here. So what's going on here? Well, after c4, what black is getting is potential counterplay along the b file, and white is getting a reinforced outpost on d5 now. So b takes c4, b takes c4. So Mickey has established that his knight can now go to d5. Queen h5. Knight d5 now is again a disaster. Bishop h3 checks, so that has to be stopped. And funny enough, the seemingly casual pawn pushing move h4 is played. Now, of course, a lot of us like push pawns freely and quickly without too much thinking, but it's very committal to play pawn moves. They can never go backwards. I wonder if there was anything better to parry against bishop h3 technically. Here, it seems h4, rook takes d8 and then h4. It seems there's nothing much better than h4 here, apparently. Oh, king g1 is now mentioned. Okay, king g1. I wonder what the issue was with king g1. It just seems h4 was, not such a nice move to have to play. But anyway, let's go with it. So h4 was played, and now Nigel kind of reroutes his bishop. So bishop d7 and puts it on c6. So of course there's knight d5, and now it actually has played knight d5. But black can play now with the b file. So rook ab8. Bit of counterplay. Queen e2 offering exchange of queens. Queens are preserved, maintaining the tension. It's a basic example of maintaining the tension, which is very important, especially against lower rate players, I think, sometimes to maintain the tension and keep the queens on. And you notice from some Tau games where Tau, for example, against Larson, about 8 times was offered the exchange of queens and 8 times refused, and later it was a crushing attack. So it's like maintaining the tension, but complexity is often much greater in chess with the queens on. So Queen G6, Queen F3. Now Rook D7, nifty stuff, because the Rook can go to B7 and try and use this B file. Okay, so King H2, the Rook's double. Rook DD2, as though it's a solid position, maybe a draw is anticipated. White just wants to play a solid, kind of keep a fortress type position. A4. Now Queen E3, I'm not really sure what this does actually. It looks as though it's just waiting to see what black is doing here. There's a nice knight on D5 after all. But can black do something with this B1 square? He's got access to B1. Maybe one idea is if the rook does move, that Queen A7 might be tempting. That might be tying down the rooks. So anyway, Bishop D7, leaving the rook on B7 for the moment, not venturing down to B1 yet. Queen goes back to F3. Bishop G4, bit of cat and mouse play. So attack and defense, playing with each other. So Bishop E6, another queen goes back as though draw by repetition or something, draw invitation. Now actually though, the rook does take the plunge into B1 with the queen not being on E3. Okay, so knight E3, what's happening now? The knight going from seemingly good post D5, is it going to go back to F5 now? Rook C1, preparing to double up rooks rather seemingly dangerously, because the king is a target now. Rook D6, Queen F7 protecting the bishop. Rook FD2, maybe threatening Rook D8 soon. The rook's double, not worried about that. G4, so the knight is being established now for a post on F5 with these two pawns. King H7, and now H5, sealing black's kingside, putting restraints on this structure. Looks like a Karpovian type restraint. Rook H1s here might actually be answerable completely with Queen takes H1 with a winning position, I think, maybe for white, because the knight's holding up C4. Would that be a completely winning position? Let's just check that from an engine point of view. I don't think black wants to give up 2 rooks for the queen here. Or maybe takes. Say Queen B7. Oh, that gets messy. No, white should end up better if in this crazy line. The queen takes C4, winning lots of pawns. No, I think white's better anyway. But it wasn't played anyway. So Rook C3 was played with a completely different idea of actually sacking the exchange for 1 or 2 pawns, or an increasing number of pawns. So the prelude is the exchange sacrifice coming up. So after King G2, powerful looking exchange sack, which unshackles black from the restraint of these 2 pawns on his structure. So an unshackling exchange sack as well, winning immediately 1 pawn, putting the other pawn in danger, increasing the vulnerability of the white king. So can Michael Adams somehow consolidate magically this position? He plays Rook B6, offering exchange of rooks, which looks like a dangerous move as well if the rook's also useful for B7 or B8. So Rook A1, convinced, going into the corner, seemingly like a naughty kid being sent to the corner. Rook A1. Okay, so Queen C3 attacking that naughty rook. The rook goes to E1, being a nuisance now, attacking E4. Rook F2 with maybe there's a threat now of queen takes e5 because there's a pin on f6. But what of rook takes e4? Well, that was what was played. Mickey just played c5. This pawn, is it looking venomous? It's sporting c6 and rook b7. Okay, bishop takes h5, winning another pawn. So we're now 3 pawns for the exchange. But rook b4, not minding even getting the rooks off here. Nigel plays bishop g6. Now Qh2 was played. Queen e6, keeping an eye maybe on this queening square, and also if trying to get in maybe on the king side later. Queen g4 is also, would be exerting more pressure. So rook g2 stops queen g4. Now there might be a threat of rook takes g6 as well, and rook takes e4. So the bishop moves, still hold on to e4. Rook b7 attacking g7 looks pretty dangerous, but the bishop's able to defend now with bishop g4 blocking this rook from g7. Rook f2. So what is the threat with rook f2? Not totally clear, but black wants to make progress, and he now plays f5. So this pawn mobility is finally becoming evidenced. Rook b4, offering exchange of rooks. Now it's actually taken. So we have here a pass pawn which doesn't seem that promising at the moment. e4, and this reveals also that queen e5 could be useful to try and get at the white king. Queen d4 stopping queen e5 check. e3, and now look at the pass pawn. Look at the pawn mobility. It seems to be crashing through in the centre with these pawns. And he's also now winning another pawn. Queen takes a2 check. So the question is, if you move the rook, then e2. So that's why the rook has to sort of be able to stop e2, e1. So check, losing another pawn. So materially, 4 pawns for the exchange. And it's looking really, really bad now after queen e2. King safety is still an issue. Material is still an issue. White's main trump card is this running c pawn. Queen f4, and now queen d2 with the idea of maybe e2, and if queen takes, then just taking queening. Queen e5, but e2 is played anyway. Rook g1. So if f4 check, king takes g4, if f4 was going to be a useful move to try and maybe queen. But first h5 reinforcing g4, so f4 is really on the cards now. Mickey plays c6 using his pass pawn, allowing f4 check. So queen takes f4, e1 looks convincing enough with that engine checking that. So the king moved to h4, and now forcing check, queen d8 check. And now another forcing check, because now the pawn mobility is really crashing through after king takes. Just f3, and the bishop's eyeing c8 for the moment. So if this pawn's gonna queen, rook g4 is gonna have to be played. c7, f2, rook takes g4 is in fact played, but black's queening first, unfortunately. f1 queen, white queens, and now it's the end is near. Forced mating 2 after queen f6 check, and then queen h6 mate. So this represents Nigel's first ever win in this elite London Classic. In all the times he's played in it, this is his first ever win. Fantastic, congratulations to him. He's been playing very innovative, very interesting stuff in the opening stages. Sometimes with seemingly embarrassing losses, but this time, this experiment with h6, it paid off. This was the round where h6s were winning with black. Strange round indeed. Let's have a look in overview and summary. So a Tarrasch with h6, the waiting move h6. So bishop d3, c5. Black wasn't getting an isolated queen's pawn or being punished with Queen G4, which doesn't really seem to work. So knight Gf3. The other knight came to E7, not F6. Now, the strange thing that happened here, Nigel and Aronian were expecting bishop takes E4. Although queen takes E4 didn't really make much sense apart from threatened mate, which was easily parable. Threatened mate. So bishop takes E4. Yeah. Okay, so queen takes E4 was played, and after the knight G6, the strange looking bishop C4. I guess one idea is, no, I just it looks as though black's got central pawn mobility, and if he can sort out this bishop, he's going to be fine. So yeah, the bishop doesn't look brilliant on C4. It is potentially a tactical target. Okay, so king H8. So we saw it being used as a tactical target, and the black queen coming in also to H4. Now black seemingly just at least equal here, with white having more pawn islands. So the next episode of the white knight coming to D5 eventually, after being reinforced with C4. And the next episode we saw in this game was the B file being used, the rook being sent into the corner pretty soon. The rook's doubling here. An exchange sack for a pawn, and then it started to go a bit downhill for white eventually. Now another pawn, some threats which weren't seemingly that difficult to parry, finding an exchange of rooks. The pawn mobility is just, it's crashing through. These are two connected passed pawns able to crash through now. So there's a temporary blockade attempt, losing another pawn now because of the pressure. And this E pawn's a real killer pawn. These pawns are running faster than white's C pawn here. So and then Mickey allowing Sporting has to be mated. I hope you enjoyed that one. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.